From small-town blues to big-city brews, how a quarter-life crisis led to coffee shop chaos, unexpected love, and a heartbreak that brewed a better me. 23 felt like a lifetime ago. Yet the memories remain as vivid as a freshly pulled espresso shot. I was suffocating in the stagnant air of my small hometown, the kind of place where everyone knew your business before you did and opportunities were as scarce as a decent Wi-Fi signal. My 5-year relationship had fizzled out, not with a bang, but with the quiet resignation of a dying ember. It wasn't the dramatic, floor-sobbing heartbreak you see in movies. It was a dull ache, a numbing sense of going through the motions, a creeping realization that I hadn't genuinely felt anything in weeks, maybe even months. My days were a monotonous cycle of staring at spreadsheets in my soul-crushing administrative job, a job I took because it was there. The thought that gnawed at me relentlessly was, is this it? Was this the grand adventure of adulthood I'd been promised? Work, eat, sleep, repeat until the sweet release of retirement? The prospect was terrifying. One particularly uninspired Friday night, I found myself slumped at a local bar with my older sister, Sarah, drowning my existential dread in cheap beer. I was, as usual, lamenting the unchanging landscape of my life when she dropped a truth bomb that resonated with the force of a caffeine jolt. And quat, then change it, and quat, she declared, punctuating her words with a dramatic sip of her drink. And quat, seriously, no one's going to ride in on a white horse and rescue you from your own boredom. Be your own damn plot twist. And quat. I laughed, dismissing it as sisterly tough love, but the seed had been planted. Sarah's words burrowed into my subconscious, refusing to be ignored. The following week, fueled by a newfound sense of desperation and a hefty dose of internet browsing, I applied for a scattershot of jobs in the nearest city, a bustling metropolis a few hours away that felt like a world apart. Miraculously, I landed an interview at a small, independent coffee shop. Within a month, fueled by a mix of anxiety and exhilaration, I had packed my meager belongings, broken the lease on my painfully affordable apartment, and moved into a shoebox-sized studio with creaky wooden floors, a perpetually malfunctioning heater, and a view of a brick wall. That tiny apartment, that escape hatch, became the launching pad for a life I hadn't dared to imagine. My first day at and quat, the daily grind and quat, as the coffee shop was creatively named, I was a nervous wreck. My hands trembled so badly I nearly sent a tower of meticulously stacked mugs crashing to the floor. That's when I met Lena, one of the veteran baristas, a whirlwind of vibrant energy and unapologetic authenticity. She flashed me a disarming grin, her eyes crinkling at the corners, and said, and quat, don't sweat it, newbie. Everyone breaks at least one mug their first week. It's practically an initiation ritual. And quat, Lena was a force of nature, the kind of person who could transform strangers into confidantes in under 5 minutes. She possessed an uncanny ability to make everyone feel seen, heard, and instantly comfortable. By the end of my chaotic first shift, she had not only saved me from further mug-related disasters but had also invited me to a ridiculously themed trivia night, gifted me a handwritten list of her favorite hole-in-the-wall restaurants, all of which were surprisingly delicious, and introduced me to what seemed like half of her sprawling, eclectic friend group. The coffee shop itself was an experience. Forget sterile corporate chains. This place oozed character. Exposed brick walls adorned with local art, a motley collection of mismatched furniture that somehow coalesced into a cozy atmosphere, and the ever-present, intoxicating aroma of freshly ground espresso that clung to your clothes long after your shift ended. The regulars were a cast of characters worthy of their own sitcom, the quiet, brooding novelist who occupied the same corner every morning, meticulously scribbling in a worn leather notebook, the elderly gentleman who religiously ordered a single croissant and meticulously dissected the morning paper, the boisterous group of college students who treated the back table like their personal clubhouse, engaging in debates that ranged from existential philosophy to the merits of pineapple on pizza. And then there was Ryan our manager. He was 28, tall, with perpetually tousled dark hair, and possessed a quiet, understated charm. He was the kind of guy who would silently troubleshoot a jammed coffee grinder without fanfare, then casually ask everyone if they needed a caffeine boost, like he hadn't just averted a full-blown coffee crisis. He had a dry, subtle sense of humor, the kind where he'd murmur a witty observation under his breath, and you'd find yourself laughing 5 seconds later because it took a moment for his brilliance to register. Initially, I chalked it up to wishful thinking, a desperate attempt to inject some romantic fantasy into my otherwise mundane existence, but I started noticing things. The way Ryan lingered near me a beat longer than necessary when explaining a new brewing technique. The accidental brushes of our hands as he passed me a steaming mug. The way his eyes seemed to hold a hint of something more when he asked about my day. But I was hesitant. Still scarred from my previous relationship, I was wary of misinterpreting kindness for romantic interest. I was determined to remain professional, to focus on mastering the art of latte foam and memorizing the intricate dance of espresso extraction. Of course, Lena saw right through me. Nothing escaped Lena's eagle-eyed observations. One night after closing, as we were wiping down the seemingly endless expanse of the coffee bar, she smirked, a knowing glint in her eyes, and said, "And quat? You know he's totally into you, right? And quat?" I froze, my hand mid-swipe, a mixture of disbelief and a strange flutter of hope swirling in my stomach. "And quat? What? No way. He's just nice to everyone. And quat?" Lena burst out laughing, the sound echoing through the otherwise silent shop. "And quat, honey, I've worked here for 2 years. Trust me. He doesn't stay late to help everyone with inventory. He practically trips over himself to find excuses to be near you." And quat? I didn't know what to do with this information. My carefully constructed wall of professional detachment began to crumble. So, naturally, I did nothing. For a while, I buried myself in work, perfecting my latte art and memorizing obscure coffee bean origins, desperately trying to ignore the undeniable chemistry that crackled between Ryan and me. But things, inevitably, started to shift. Slowly, subtly, the dynamic between us evolved. Ryan started inviting me to grab a drink after work, casually framing it as a group outing, and quat, because everyone's going, and quat, except it wasn't really everyone. It was usually me, him, and maybe Lena, who would conveniently bow out after one drink, leaving Ryan and me to navigate the awkward space between friendship and something more. Then it was just me and him, lingering over beers in dimly lit bars, talking for hours about everything and nothing. I vividly remember the first night I realized I might actually like him. Like really, truly like him. We were sitting in this quiet, unassuming dive bar, the kind with worn leather booths, flickering neon signs, and an old jukebox that seemed to play only the saddest Country songs. Ryan was recounting a story about his ill-fated attempt to move across the country after college, a venture that ended in spectacular failure. He wasn't ashamed or embarrassed by it. He just laughed, a genuine, unguarded laugh that crinkled the corners of his eyes, and said it taught him a valuable lesson: that starting over is hard, messy, and often terrifying, but not impossible. I went home that night feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of possibility, a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, life could be more than spreadsheets and numbing routines. But of course, real life isn't a predictable rom-com. It's a tangled web of messy emotions, complicated relationships, and unexpected plot twists. Around the same time that Ryan and I were navigating our tentative dance, Lena was going through a particularly brutal breakup. One night, she showed up at my tiny apartment, a tear-streaked mess clutching a pint of Ben and Jerry's. We stayed up until 4 a.m., talking, crying, eating ice cream straight from the tub, and making ridiculously elaborate lists of everything she deserved in her next relationship. Lena became my lifeline in that sprawling, unfamiliar city. She was the first person I'd call when something good or bad happened, the one who dragged me to questionable karaoke nights when I felt like wallowing in my apartment, the one who knew my coffee order better than I did. She was my chosen family, my anchor in a sea of uncertainty. So, when things with Ryan slowly, inexorably turned into something more, late-night texts that stretched into hours, stolen glances across the coffee bar that made my stomach flip, lingering touches that sent shivers down my spine, Lena was the first person I confided in. She just grinned, a wide, knowing grin that stretched from ear to ear, and said, and quote, finally, it's about damn time, and quote, she was my biggest cheerleader, my confidante, my partner in crime. But then came the plot twist I never saw coming, the espresso shot of betrayal that left a bitter taste in my mouth. A few months into whatever was happening between Ryan and me, we hadn't officially defined it, but the unspoken connection was undeniable. Lena started acting off, distant, withdrawn, canceling plans at the last minute, being short with me at work, snapping at me over minor things that she would have usually laughed off. I initially attributed it to her still reeling from the breakup fallout, assuming she was just going through a rough patch, until one night, while we were sitting next to each other on my cramped couch, watching some mindless reality TV, I accidentally saw a text message flash across her phone screen. I tried not to look, I really did, but my eyes were drawn to the name emblazoned across the notification, Ryan. And the snippet of the message I glimpsed wasn't work-related. It was something intimate. My stomach plummeted. My heart pounded in my chest. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I had just seen. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, to let my insecurities and anxieties run wild. But I also couldn't unsee what I'd seen. The image of that text message was seared into my brain, fueling a growing sense of unease and betrayal. That night, I barely slept. I tossed and turned, replaying every interaction with Ryan and Lena in my head, searching for clues, wondering if I'd missed some obvious sign, some subtle indication that something was going on behind my back. The next day, fueled by a potent cocktail of anxiety and resentment, I confronted Lena. At first, she vehemently denied anything was happening. She accused me of being paranoid, of letting my insecurities get the better of me. But when I pressed her, When I told her I had seen the text message, her carefully constructed facade crumbled. She admitted that she and Ryan had hooked up once, a drunken indiscretion that occurred. And quote, before you and he were really a thing. And quote, but it and quote, didn't mean anything. And quote, it was a mistake, she insisted, a momentary lapse in judgment fueled by alcohol and loneliness. Her words felt like a physical blow, a punch to the gut that left me gasping for air. I didn't know who I was. Angrier at Ryan for betraying my trust and crossing a line that should have been obvious, or Lena for not telling me, for jeopardizing our friendship for a fleeting moment of physical gratification. I stopped talking to both of them. I ghosted them completely. Going to work became an exercise in excruciating awkwardness, a daily reminder of the betrayal that had shattered my carefully constructed world. And that's when I learned a harsh but invaluable lesson about adulthood. Sometimes you have to choose yourself, even if it means sacrificing relationships, even if it means losing people you care about. Sometimes, the most painful cuts are the ones that heal you the most. Eventually, after weeks of agonizing internal debate, I sat down with Ryan and ended things, officially and irrevocably. I told him that I couldn't be with someone who had so blatantly disregarded my feelings, someone who had prioritized a momentary physical connection over the potential for a genuine, meaningful relationship. I told Lena that I needed space, that I couldn't be around her until I had processed my anger and disappointment. I told her that I valued our friendship, but that I needed time to heal, to figure out if we could ever truly rebuild the trust that had been broken. It hurt like hell. It felt like ripping a piece of myself away, like severing a limb. But the funny thing is, life didn't fall apart. The world didn't end. The sun still rose in the east and set in the west. I kept going, one foot in front of the other, slowly piecing my life back together. I started exploring the city on my own, discovering hidden gems and quirky cafes that I never would have found if I had been clinging to the familiar comfort of my old routines. I made new friends, people who shared my interests and passions, people who saw me for who I was, not who I was dating. I started taking weekend trips by myself, venturing into the wilderness, hiking through forests, and sleeping under the stars. I even got promoted at the coffee shop, becoming a shift supervisor and earning a slightly less pathetic hourly wage. And slowly, painstakingly, Lena and I found our way back to each other. Not like before, not quite as close as we once were, but enough that when I think of that tumultuous period of my life now, I smile more than I ache. We rebuilt our friendship on a foundation of honesty and vulnerability, acknowledging the pain of the past while focusing on the potential for a stronger, more resilient future. Looking back, years later, with the benefit of hindsight and a healthy dose of perspective, I don't regret any of it. Not the impulsive move to the city, not the chaotic coffee shop job, not the nights spent laughing until my stomach hurt, not even the heartbreak. They were the things that cracked me open, that forced me to confront my own vulnerabilities, that ultimately made me grow into the person I am today. The small town blues may have faded, but the big city brews taught me lessons I could never have learned within the confines of my comfort zone.